Wir sind ja ab jetzt und sofort offen für alle, die ansatzweise nur Interesse an unseren Ideen und Diskussionen haben, die wir gleich wälzen werden, rund um Politik und Beteiligung und das alles online und übers Netz. Wir haben einen pickepackevollen Nachmittag und deswegen will ich nur ganz kurz umreißen, was als nächstes hier so auf Sie zukommt. Und zwar sehen Sie hinter mir schon Irina Mohr und Ingolf Pernies. Die beiden werden Sie gleich erstmal anständig begrüßen. Irina Mohr ist die Leiterin hier des Forum Berlin der Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, also das Gebäude, wo wir hier sind, unsere Hausherrin und Gastgeberin sozusagen. Und Ingolf Pernies ist einer der Direktoren des Humboldt Instituts für Internet und Gesellschaft. Und die beiden und auch das Institut und die Stiftung haben ja auch das nur möglich gemacht, was hier gestern schon passiert ist und was hier heute noch passiert. Dafür schon mal Danke an alle beide. Und wenn die ordentlich begrüßt haben, dann geht es erstmal an handfeste wissenschaftliche Forschungsfakten. Dann werden wir darüber sprechen, wie das eigentlich so funktioniert mit den Online-Petitionen in Großbritannien und in Deutschland bis jetzt. Dazu aber später mehr, da haben wir dann andere Podiumsteilnehmer. Ich gebe jetzt erstmal ab an Irina Mohr, die erstmal herzlich willkommen heißen wird. Bitte schön.
Vielen Dank, Maurice. Ja, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde des Internet, liebe Freunde der Forschung, ich darf Sie alle im Namen der Friedrich Ebert Stiftung hier und heute sehr herzlich begrüßen zu unserer Veranstaltung Online in die Politik, Chancen und Risiken gesellschaftlicher Partizipation. Diese Veranstaltung ist Teil einer Zusammenarbeit, einer Kooperation mit dem Alexander von Humboldt Institute für Internet und Gesellschaft. Was für ein Name, lieber Ingolf. Ich darf mich für diese Kooperation, die uns sehr viel Freude gemacht hat und die natürlich für uns auch sehr, sehr wichtig ist, weil sie hier im Haus dann so einen wunderbaren Austausch ermöglicht zwischen Wissenschaft, Politik, Öffentlichkeit. Dafür darf ich mich sehr herzlich bedanken, namentlich auch bei Wolfgang Schulz und bei Larissa Wunderlich, die dafür gesorgt haben, dass das alles hier organisatorisch und inhaltlich und in Zusammenarbeit so wunderbar gelaufen ist. Vielen herzlichen Dank. Zunächst möchte ich einen kleinen Film zeigen. Einen kleinen Film, der aus einem Portal stammt. Da findet man ihn aktuell, und zwar ist das ein Debattenportal, das die Friedrich Ebert Stiftung seit 2 Jahren betreibt. Es heißt Sag was. Sag was, darauf erscheinen meinungsstarke Präsentationen, Filme, Diskussionsblogs. Und wir versuchen auf diese Weise unseren Beitrag zum Thema Partizipation im Netz zu bringen. Und diesen kleinen Film werde ich Ihnen jetzt zeigen, der aktuell draufsteht, weil er mit unserem Thema, so glaube ich, heute sehr viel zu tun hat. Bitte schön.
Molly ist eine junge Babysitterin aus Washington, Vereinigten Staaten. Und Molly hat eine Petition auf Change gegen die Bank von Amerika gestartet. Die Bank von Amerika ist die größte Bank der Vereinigten Staaten, so wie die Deutsche Bank. Und die Bank von Amerika hat gesagt, wir führen jetzt eine $5 EC-Kartengebühr ein. Und das kurz nachdem der amerikanische Steuerzahler die
Immer, ne? Wenn man was vorführen möchte.
Geht das über Internet?
Irina Mohr, möchten Sie die Geschichte einfach fertig erzählen, was da passiert ist? Das wäre schön. Was mit Molly, der jungen Babysitterin, ist. Vielleicht kennen es ja auch einige, das Beispiel.
Ich weiß nicht, ob jemand schon auf der Seite gewesen ist, aber ich erzähle die Geschichte auch gerne zu Ende. Molly ist eine Babysitterin in den USA und sie hat eine Petition gestartet auf der Seite Change.org. Change.org ist ein Webportal, auf dem man Petitionen starten kann und andere Menschen können sich dem anschließen. Das kann jeder tun, das ist ganz transparent und offen. Und Molly hat also eine Petition gestartet gegen eine 5-Euro-Gebühr, die die amerikanische Bank ihren Kunden auferlegen wollte, kurz nachdem der Staat mit Steuergeldern diese Bank massiv unterstützt hat. Das hat Molly nicht gut gefunden, beziehungsweise war sie empört darüber. Sie hat eine Petition gestartet und hat innerhalb von 2 Wochen 300.000 Unterschriften erzielt. Also Leute, die per E-Mail diese Petition unterstützt haben. Die amerikanische Bank hat daraufhin diese Gebühr zurückgezogen, diese $5. Und auch andere amerikanische Banken haben diese Gebühr zurückgezogen, sodass es, weil Molly diese Petition gestartet hat, online diese Gebühr jetzt nicht mehr gibt. Ich finde, das ist ein sehr schönes Beispiel dafür, wie eine Bürgerin, ein Mensch, der ja von Politik oder von Wirtschaftsentscheidungen betroffen sind, über das Internet Einfluss nehmen kann, und Molly hat damit ihre ganz eigene Verbraucherpolitik betrieben und erfolgreich betrieben. Ja, meine Damen und Herren, Sie sehen schon allein daran, dass unser Thema hochaktuell ist, auch wenn das natürlich nur eine Facette ist. Dieser Film, den ich Ihnen jetzt leider nicht bis zu Ende zeigen konnte, zeigt ja, was für eine Kraft durch das Netz zu erreichen ist, auch vielleicht in Bereichen, in denen die Politik scheinbar machtlos ist. Ich sage Verbraucherpolitik, Bankenrettung und so weiter und so fort. Das Thema ist hochaktuell. Es wird ja derzeit auch in den Koalitionsverhandlungen unter dem Stichwort digitale Agenda verhandelt zwischen SPD und CDU. Einiges ist auch schon nach draußen gedrungen. Auf der digitalen Agenda steht zum Beispiel die technische Bereitstellung, den Zugang zum Netz, Breitbandverbindungen und so weiter für alle Bürgerinnen in Stadt und Land. Das ist ja ein Infrastrukturproblem, vor dem wir stehen, das auch mit Zugang zu tun hat. Es geht außerdem bei der digitalen Agenda um Netzneutralität und Gleichbehandlung. Es geht aber auch um einen verbesserten Datenschutz und den Schutz von Persönlichkeitsrechten. Und allein diese Aufzählung lässt ja schon deutlich werden, dass es tatsächlich um Chancen und Risiken geht. Nicht zuletzt der NSA-Skandal zeigt uns das ja auch ganz besonders deutlich. Chancen und Risiken digitaler Partizipation. Dieses Thema steht ja auch und besonders im Fokus wegen seiner Relevanz für die Demokratie und für die Möglichkeiten des Brückenbaus zwischen Gesellschaft und Politik. Wir werden heute ja einiges dazu hören. Lange Jahre haben wir einen Befund aus der Kommunikationswissenschaft gehabt, der da sagte, dass die Kluft zwischen den Bürgern und der Politik aufgrund der medialen Systematiken, dass es eine tiefe Kluft zwischen diesen beiden Seiten gibt und dass es eigentlich fast nur noch sehr ressourcenstarke, interessengebundene Einflüsse und Kräfte schaffen, zur Politik und auf politische Entscheidungen durchaus stark Einfluss zu nehmen. Nun ist das Netz vielleicht ein Instrument partizipativer Demokratie. Wir werden heute darüber reden wollen. Vielleicht ein Instrument, die Kluft zu überwinden, die da beklagt wurde, und neue Brücken zu bauen. Kann das Netz vielleicht Interessen von unten bündeln, wie es ja beim Thema, das Molly aufgetan hat, gelungen ist? Kann das Netz solche Interessen bündeln, die sich sonst nicht finden, sondern eher zerklüftet oder zersplittert in der Gesellschaft sind? Und kann das Netz oder solche Instrumentarien diese Interessen bündeln und in den politischen Prozess einspeisen? Das ist hier die Frage, sowohl in den Entscheidungsprozess als auch in den legislativen Prozess. Und insgesamt kann man natürlich dann sagen, dann wäre die Demokratie ja einen entscheidenden Schritt weiter. Ich habe Ihnen dieses Beispiel gegeben, weil es eben auch eine Facette hat, die nicht unbedingt mit institutionalisierten Zugängen zu tun hat, die mit Partizipation von Seiten der Zivilgesellschaft zu tun hat. Und ich denke, auch das ist eine Seite digitaler Partizipation, die es zu berücksichtigen gilt. Wir werden über weitere Facetten und Möglichkeiten reden, darauf freue ich mich, und ich wünsche uns dafür spannende Einblicke, Diskussionen. Vielen Dank noch einmal an das Institut für Internet und Gesellschaft, lieber Ingolf, und jetzt gebe ich zurück an Marlies Schaum. Vielen Dank.
Und ich gebe direkt weiter an Ingolf Pernies. Vielen Dank, Irina Mohr.
Vielen Dank. Ja, herzlichen Dank, Marlies. Marlies Schaum ist so freundlich, hier zu moderieren. Sie hat sich schon hervorragend bewährt.
Du weißt, dass ich das Mikrofon habe und jederzeit wegnehmen kann, wenn du was Peinliches über mich sagst, ne?
Ja. Ich werde mich hüten, Peinliches zu sagen, aber die Wahrheit ist, dass sie das schon ganz toll gemacht hat bei unserem digitalen Salon, den Sie alle Monate, glaube ich, einmal sehen können oder auch hören können im Radio. Also wer Sie auch dann mal wiedersehen will, immer im digitalen Salon anschalten. Ganz, ganz herzlichen Dank, liebe Irina, für dich, dass du uns hier beherbergst, uns die Räume zur Verfügung stellst, du natürlich über die Ebert Stiftung, ja, mit der Ebert Stiftung auch. An diese geht ein ganz, ganz herzlicher Dank. Wir sind verbunden durch eine schon lange Zusammenarbeit in Form von Simulationen von europäischen Ratssitzungen und ähnlichen Dingen, durch gemeinsame Werkstattgespräche, die wir schon durchgeführt haben zur europäischen Verfassung seit Jahren. Darum geht es aber heute nicht, außer dass ich Ihnen Dank sagen kann und muss. Das Humboldt Institut für Internet und Gesellschaft muss ich Ihnen vielleicht auch nicht lange vorstellen. Das hat sich gebildet aus der Notwendigkeit heraus, einmal über die Wechselwirkungen zwischen Internet und Gesellschaft ganz allgemein nachzudenken und dazu forschen. Und am Anfang dachten wir, das ist ganz gut übersichtlich, nicht? Internet ist was Kleines, die Gesellschaft ist auch was Kleines. Nachher stellt sich mit Schritt für Schritt mit der Forschung und Arbeit in dem Gebiet heraus, das ist einfach riesig und unermesslich. Und wenn ich heute an die ersten Sitzungen heute früh denke und an die Sitzungen gestern schon, allein zum Thema Partizipation, es gibt so viele Facetten und so viele Dinge, wo man aha sagt, aus den Berichten der Einzelnen, die dann die Erfahrungen aus Brasilien oder aus Italien oder überall her berichten, nicht? Wie Partizipation und Internet zusammenhängen in Bezug auf die Politik, das ist riesig spannend. Und das Schöne, meine Damen und Herren, ist, dass dieses Institut integriert ist, dank Urs Gassers Initiative, der ist hier von dem Bergman Center aus Harvard. Es ist integriert in ein Netzwerk der Zentren. Da ist es oben, hier irgendwo, da steht es, ne? Da können Sie nachlesen, wie es genau heißt. Network of Centers, sodass wir einen internationalen Austausch haben. Und ich freue mich auch riesig, dass wir Nisha Khan zum Beispiel aus Indien, aus Bangalore hier dabei haben und Juan Carlos de Martin von dem Zentrum in Turin und aus Brasilien und so weiter, natürlich auch vom Harvard Bergman Center. Die Partizipation ist natürlich kein neues Thema in der Politik. Ich erinnere mich, als ich noch ganz klein war, in den 60er Jahren, war das schon Thema auch der Staatsrechtslehrertagung. Partizipation in der Politik, Partizipation und Demokratie. Und man kann sich natürlich überlegen, Demokratie ist Partizipation, nicht? Ohne dass die Bürger sich selbst vertreten, wählen gehen und so weiter, kann Demokratie nicht funktionieren. Ohne dass die im Diskurs teilnehmen und Einfluss zu nehmen versuchen, geht Demokratie überhaupt nicht. Und was ist jetzt eigentlich neu dabei? Neu ist eben das Internet und die Möglichkeiten, die das Internet eröffnet. Ich denke, da ich Europarechtler auch bin, oft daran, dass gerade die EU mit dem angeblichen Demokratiedefizit diese Partizipation ganz groß schreibt. Nicht nur Zugang zu Dokumenten, nicht nur Transparenz, die ganze Informationsfreiheitsbewegung kommt aus Europa nach Deutschland, aber auch gerade das Bedürfnis, Demokratie im klassischen Sinne mit der Wahl zum Europäischen Parlament oder den nationalen Parlamente zu ergänzen durch partizipative Elemente und Partizipation. So war das Forum zum Beispiel zum Konvent über eine Verfassung für Europa seinerzeit erstmalig der ganze Prozess der Vorbereitung solcher Verfassung durch das Internet möglich gemacht. Jeder konnte verfolgen, welche Dokumente, welche Dinge eingereicht wurden und auch mitmachen. Nur die Leute haben überhaupt nicht mitgemacht, weil die kannten das gar nicht, dass man sowas kann. Und die wussten auch nicht, wie groß der Einfluss ist. Landet das, was ich da teilnehmend mitteile, nach Brüssel übers Internet, im elektronischen oder digitalen Papierkorb oder wird das irgendwie zur Kenntnis genommen? Weiß man nicht. Das stellt natürlich viele Fragen. Diese Möglichkeiten, die das Internet für die Partizipation des Bürgers bietet, auf der einen Seite erregen große Hoffnungen. Heute haben wir auch gesehen und gestern habe ich gelernt, dass es auch gute Fragen gibt dazu. Zum Beispiel, wenn ganz viele anonyme E-Petitionen einreichen, wer sagt mir, dass die nicht alle aus Australien kommen? Und von Leuten, die überhaupt nichts hier mit zu sagen haben. Die machen hier eine Petition, Millionen von Stimmen ganz beeindruckend für den Bundestag, der macht sofort ein Gesetz in dem Sinne, aber keiner von den deutschen Bürgern hat das je für gut gehalten. Nicht? Das kann ja nicht sein. Oder die Grenzen, wo verteilt sich in Bezug auf partizipative Initiativen aus dem bürgerlichen Raum, nehmen wir ACTA, ja, im Europäischen Parlament, das dann aufgrund von diesen 2 Millionen Eingaben oder aktiven Beteiligungen gegen ACTA entschieden hat, wir ratifizieren diese ACTA-Abkommen nicht. Ist das repräsentativ, wenn es 2 Millionen sind Stimmen gegen ACTA von 500 Millionen Stimmen, die die Bürger in der Europäischen Union haben? Wie stark muss sich ein Abgeordneter, muss sich dann ein Politiker beeindrucken lassen? Wie seriös, ernst muss er das nehmen, was in diesen öffentlichen Foren im Internet gesagt wird? Nun, das alles ist natürlich nicht mein Thema, sondern das Thema, über das wir alle zusammen nachher diskutieren wollen, aufgrund von wunderbaren Einführungen, auf die ich jetzt hoffe, unserer Kollegen. Und zwar wird die erste Einführung Helen Margetts aus England geben. Und weil ich mich so sehr darauf freue, höre ich jetzt auf. Danke Ihnen herzlich, dass Sie dabei sind und mitdiskutieren wollen und gebe zurück an Marlies. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank, Ingolf. Vielen, vielen Dank. Und wir machen nach dieser unglaublich netten Begrüßungseinführung, nach der Sie beide sich jetzt wieder setzen dürfen und durch neue Gäste ersetzt werden hier vorne, darf ich 3 Menschen nach vorne bitten, die uns jetzt handfeste wissenschaftliche Erkenntnisse mal auf den Tisch legen, und zwar rund um Online-Petitionen. In Großbritannien und in Deutschland, wie funktioniert es da? Werden die angenommen? Was hakt noch und was nicht? Und dazu darf ich Helen Margetts auf die Bühne rufen und Wolfgang Schulz und Jan Schmidt. Alle 3 bitte nach vorne. Schön, dass ihr es alle schaffen konntet, hierher zu kommen. Sehr schön. Ich darf mal ganz kurz die Runde noch vorstellen, bevor ich mich auch an die Seite verziehe. Helen Margetts leitet das Oxford Internet Institute der Oxford University und sie hat eben, wie gesagt, unter anderem dazu geforscht, wie rund es denn so läuft um die Online-Petitionen in Großbritannien. Wird uns dazu gleich was erzählen. Sie wird den Anfang machen. Dann wird Jan Schmidt uns etwas erzählen. Jan Schmidt ist Soziologe. Er arbeitet am Hans-Bredow-Institut in Hamburg. Und er hat unter anderem erforscht, wie denn eigentlich das Angebot des Deutschen Bundestags in Deutschland so ankommt. Die haben ja eine eigene Online-Petitionen-Plattform. Wie wird die angenommen? Funktioniert es so, wie es soll? Jan Schmidt wird uns dazu danach was sagen, nachdem Helen Margetts fertig ist. Und ich übergebe jetzt sowieso an Wolfgang Schulz. Wolfgang Schulz ist vieles, aber vor allem ist er auch Direktor des Hans-Bredow-Instituts und einer der Direktoren des Humboldt-Instituts für Internet und Gesellschaft. Und er wird jetzt die beiden im Zaum halten und danach die Diskussion führen. Das wird auf Englisch ab jetzt sein, weil Helen Margetts als unser Gast ja auch Englisch spricht. Wer vielleicht noch eine Übersetzung möchte oder braucht, vorne in der Halle gibt es sonst Kopfhörer. Wer einfach so folgen will, wunderbar. Und danach und zwischendurch wird Wolfgang Schulz natürlich auch immer wieder Sie mal zu Wort kommen lassen. Ich habe jetzt eine gute Stunde, gebe ich mal ab und danach haben wir Kaffeepäuschen. Aber erstmal Hirn anstrengen und viel Spaß dabei.
Thanks very much, Marlies. Now I have the mic and be aware, now you are not in control anymore. Just a very, very brief introduction from my side. Ingolf Pernice already mentioned that at the Humboldt Institute we pondered about issues which would be interesting to study on a transdisciplinary from a transdisciplinary angle. And one thing that came to mind was, of course, participation, because participation is something that's interesting for lawyers because it changes procedures, parliamentary procedures or whatever, changes institutions maybe like the petition, which is our issue today. And for political scientists, of course, and for sociologists and other disciplines as well. That's why we choose to have a closer look at participation. And within the spectrum of participation, we found it extremely interesting to focus on e-petition because it's a very specific regulated thing, and therefore extremely interesting to focus on that. And to focus on that on a kind of comparative perspective, because petition is not something we have only in Germany, it's something we have in other countries as well. And here comes the network of centers into play. Ingolf Pernice mentioned it already and left it to me to say that the Oxford Internet Institute is part of this network as well, and we are very proud to work with them on issues like that, and very happy that Helen has taken over the role of giving the first insight on what participation means and what empirical results she has on participation in Great Britain. Helen, thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I'd like to thank the organisers and the Internet Institute very much for organising this event and the Foundation for hosting it. I'd also like to thank the previous speakers in this session for giving such nice examples of petitions and making them sound like an interesting thing, which I do believe they are, but that's a good start for this session. I'd like to start also, though, by saying that I see petitions as a very interesting example of collective action, political participation, mobilization. They're sort of a nice example of a more general phenomenon which we've been seeing a lot of in this decade. And I think if this decade is remembered for anything, it might be the kind of huge wave almost of collective action that we seem to have seen across the world, from the Arab Spring to Turkey to Brazil to all the things that people have been talking about here today. And the internet-based platforms have been fingered, associated with a lot of those developments. They have been, you know, we've had the Facebook revolution, or even a couple of those. We've had the Twitter demonstrations, the Twitter protests. We've had, even in the UK, we've had the BlackBerry Messenger riots. You know, we've had a lot of associations made between the internet and collective action and political participation. We feel like something's going on, as the BBC journalist Paul Mason put it. It all seems to be kicking off everywhere in the title of his recent book, but we don't actually know that much about the changing nature of collective action in the age of social media. We know lots of examples, we all have our own stories to tell, but in terms of systematic analysis of data, actually, I think we, as academic researchers, are only just sort of starting with that. So this is an attempt to start with that, to use petitions as a way into that kind of question. What does collective action look like when so much of it takes place on the internet and social media? So what I'm going to talk about is the result of a more general stream of research at the Oxford Internet Institute, of which I am the director, where we're looking at the relationship between the internet and democracy. And this is joint work with my research team, Scott Hale and Taha Youseri from the Oxford Internet Institute, and also Peter John from University College London. Okay, so what I think is interesting about petition signing, or that is electronic petition signing, because I think there won't be any other sort of petition signing before too long, is that it's a good example of a micro donation of time and effort. It's kind of like a micro act of political participation. And social media do facilitate new kind of tiny acts of political participation. They reduce the participation costs. If you want to sign a petition, you don't have to go and sort of find somebody standing in the street with a petition that interests you. You can immediately go online in a very short space of time, find the right sort of petition. And that applies to all sorts of things, all sorts of acts of participation. You can click like on a political video. You can download a political video. You can click like on something's shared with you on Facebook. That's a tiny act of political participation, but I believe it's still an act of political participation. And that extends the kind of ladder of political participation, which we've traditionally seen, you know, going from things like small things like signing petitions right up to, I don't know, giving your life for a political cause. At the bottom end of that ladder, we're seeing an extension of these tiny acts of participation. It's slightly controversial in many political cultures to see these things as acts of political participation. I'm not sure about Germany, but certainly in Britain, it's controversial to say something like this is an act of political participation. In Britain, we have very much an association of politics with pain. It has to be painful. You have to go to a boring meeting in a cold town hall. You have to suffer. Then it's politics. If you don't suffer, it's not politics. And in fact, I was speaking in our parliament, in our legislature in 1999. I was a witness to our Public Administration Select Committee. And I was asked to sort of give some examples of political participation on the internet, which then was very much in its early days. So I gave a sort of a couple of examples, and the chair of that committee said to me, "Oh well, if you want to talk about, you know, somebody sitting at home in their pajamas pressing buttons because they've got nothing better to do, you know, I don't really think of that as political participation." He said that in '99. In spite of all that's happened since then, I think there are many people in a British political culture and many other political cultures who don't really see these things as political participation. In fact, I read out the quote from Hansard that I've just given you a summary of to the very same guy who's now a visiting professor at Birkbeck College in London at an event I was at quite recently. And I thought he might be sort of ashamed. I was almost kind of feeling I shouldn't do it. But actually, as I was reading it, he was kind of nodding his head. Yes, 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 I was right. So you see, it's still very much there. And I very much sort of disagree with that. And I think it's important, as those of us who are interested in political life, that we take these kind of tiny acts of participation seriously because they're reshaping the dynamics of collective action. The data that I'm presenting is data that we've been collected for 3 or 4 years from 3 petition sites. One was the number 10 Downing Street petitions platform, which ran from 2009 to 2011. The other is the Cabinet Office petitions platform, which replaced it in 2011 to now. And the third is the We the People, the US petitions platform. We've been scraping data from all those platforms for the last 4 years. 3 or 4 years, varying across platforms. And that's given us a huge data set of petition signing. In fact, now we scrape the Cabinet Office one every hour. We also download daily the data that they've made available on the API. We've got a lot of data, basically, and it's telling us interesting things. We're only at the beginning of analysing it. One thing I can tell you straight away, petition signing is popular. I know, I'm sure you can say that from Germany. The first UK site got 12 million signatures from 5 million unique email addresses in the time it operates. That's a big chunk of the population. The Cabinet Office site has received 17 million visits from 13 million unique visitors. 7.3 million signatures so far. Big chunk of the population is doing petition signing. The White House platform got 3.4 million signatures in its first year, slightly less, but growing very rapidly. Why I believe that these tiny acts of participation are important is because they scale up to large-scale mobilizations. It's giving us a new ecology of mobilization. That means a kind of survival of the fittest, large number of failures, small number of unpredictable and extreme events. And I'll show you what I mean in a second, but I think it's very important to remember we hear about all these great examples of internet-based collective action. We only hear about the successful ones. We never hear about the unsuccessful ones. And it's important to realize that actually nearly all collective action on the internet bombs out completely, fails completely, and we don't think like that. That makes for an unstable, unruly, unpredictable influence on political life, hence the need, I believe, to understand it. Okay, there's a picture. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of graphs and I know that not everybody in the audience is sort of technically interested in these sort of graphs. I promise to summarize each one sort of rapidly and succinctly and not go into the details. So here is the data from the first petition site. Okay, so it's quite pretty. We chose nice colors, but what does it mean? Basically, the big red block is all the ones that failed even to get 500 signatures, which is what, for that site, you needed to get an official response. So the red ones, all the ones that completely failed and didn't go anywhere, 95%, and that's a really consistent pattern against any petition platform I've looked at. 95% don't go anywhere, don't get off the ground. The other 5% are the blue ones. What you can sort of see from there is the blue ones seem to be going up really pretty quickly, but it only gives you an impression of that. You can't tell from there, but we do have more data. Okay, this is the same data for the next UK site, same story, exactly the same story again. 95% of them fail to get even 500 signatures. They've changed the kind of incentive mechanism now on this site. If you get over 100,000, you get a parliamentary debate. Only 0.1% get over 100,000. Only 1% get over 10,000, which then you get some kind of official response. Again, most of them bomb out completely, very similar pattern. And this is big data. We've got a lot of data here. There's 20,000 petitions in there, a lot of signatures. You know, that's a fairly robust signing. The other thing you can see here, okay, the yellow ones are the successful ones. They're shooting up pretty quickly. They're shooting up at the beginning. It seems you have to get going quickly. And all the data tells you that. If you don't get going on the first day, you've probably had it. The White House shows a similar pattern. Well, not completely, because it's a different site. In the US, you have to get 150 signatures before you're allowed to publicize your signature, hence the white space over there. But apart from that, certainly at the top end, it's the same story. Only a very few of them succeed. Most of them fail. Okay, so we have modeled, and one of my research teams, Taha Yasseri, is actually a physicist, and this is a model taken from a more physics-type methodology. It's a model of a collective attention decay, and what that shows is attention decays really, really rapidly. The people's capacity to sort of pass a petition on, or the attention that the public at large pay to a petition, at the end of a day, it's basically gone. So if you haven't got a big chunk of signatures on that first day, then it's going to be digital dust, or the digital waste paper basket, as one of the other speakers was saying. That's true in the UK and the US. This model holds good across countries, across data sets. Okay, design matters. At the beginning of 2012, the UK government changed their site to introduce trending information on the front page, you know, which are the most popular petitions, the 6 most important petitions. Unfortunately, they changed this without telling us, and it crashed our crawler, which was upsetting for us, but there we are. We soon got it back up again. And actually, it provided us with a wonderful natural experiment, because we could see the effect of having trending information. What happens when you tell people that these petitions are the most popular? And this is a really interesting graph. We thought it might increase the number of signatures on the site, that it might make the site more popular if they had a very good idea which were more popular, but it didn't. The first graph there shows that there's no significant difference between the total number of signatures per day before the trending information was introduced and after the trending information was introduced. You've got, you know, more or less the same number of signatures per day. But in the second one, it shows the Gini coefficient, which is a summary of the distribution. It shows the equality or otherwise of the distribution. And there you can see that there is a big effect, a significant effect. It basically means that those petitions that are trending, the popular ones, start getting more signatures, but then the less popular ones get less signatures compared with before the trending was introduced. That's really quite interesting because remember, the overall number of signatures is not changing. What it seems to suggest is that people are sort of coming along, there were before and afterwards people who are coming along to the site. They may sign a petition they want to sign, but then they're staying on the site because they want to do a little bit more politics. They want some more politics. They're not sure what. They want to sign something about something. They're not sure what it is yet. They look around on the site. Now the trendings information is there, so they pick one of those because they're sort of thrust in their face, and they sign those. Interesting. We never thought we'd find that. We didn't think that that was going on, but now we have some good evidence that it is. I said something about I mentioned the word leptokurtic, which I shouldn't to a general audience, but basically leptokurtic is the distribution of earthquakes. Anybody who's familiar with sort of the science of earthquakes, which actually I'm not at all, but you know, you get some very extreme earthquakes, and you get lots of tiny, tiny little earthquakes, and you don't get so many earthquakes in between those two extremes. Mobilizations around petitions are like that. So you get some very extreme ones, the ones that kind of very few percent that do well, and lots of ones that don't go anywhere at all. And that's what this graph shows. It shows the daily percent change on the number 10 site, showing that on some days you get very, very big shifts, and that's usually the first day of a petition, and then lots and lots of other days where you get lots of very small changes, but you don't have a bell-shaped curve. And what's that showing is this very kind of unstable arrangement where some do very well and some just bomb out, most just bomb out completely. That's a very consistent pattern across this data. Those are some things we've done with the data. I know I must stop soon, so I'll just tell you some of the more things we want to do with the data, that we're going to do with the data as soon as possible. The next thing we're going to do is a project looking at this kind of new ecology of political participation. The data that we take every day from the petition site is geocoded. That means we have the postcode of every signatory on the site. We don't have names, and we wouldn't really be able to look at them if we did, because it would be big ethical issues with that. But we have the postcodes. We will be able to map completely petition signing in the UK. As a political scientist myself, that's incredibly exciting. We've never had data like this before. We've never been able to have the complete data set of all petition signing before now. We've, in general, apart from voting data, just had sort of survey data about what people think they did or think they might do, not data, complete data like this about what a whole population actually did. That's going to be very interesting. We can look at urban, rural patterns. We can look at national, regional patterns. We can look at what issues matter to which people in which part of the country. Very interesting indeed. We also want to look at the diffusion of these. We're as well as taking data from the sites themselves, we're taking data from Twitter, and we're following all these petitions across Twitter to see how much attention they get there. There's some very preliminary analysis of that here, which shows that basically people are tweeting as well as signing. That there is a correlation there, a sort of relationship, an association between people signing petitions and people tweeting about petitions. We've done a time series analysis of this so that we know that people in general seem to, they tweet telling people to sign. So obviously Twitter is playing a role in the sort of diffusion of these petitions, but the exact nature of that pattern we don't know. But it seems tweeting comes first, saying to people sign. We've analysed the words used in tweets about petitions rather than thanking people for signing or telling them what happened. So that's another thing we want to do. I mean, of all the sort of initiatives that there are on the internet, from the lolcats that we were talking about this morning to hardcore political activity, petitions have been suggested to be one of the most sort of content most likely to go viral. Very little content does go viral in spite of what's suggested by the cat videos. But petitions are sort of up there in terms of having the best chance, and we want to have a look at that, having got the data in Twitter as well. We also want to do analysis of issues. If you look there, the BBC are very interested in this data set, and they published some early, they had put some early results on their website, one of the graphs that I showed you there. And they said, oh, can we see 3 petitions, examples of petitions which have a very high following, a high number of signatures, a sort of medium number, and ones which fail completely. And I did that with 3 different issues, and then I thought, well, people are just going to be interested in the issues and they won't look at the data. So I said to the BBC, I think we should do it with 3 petitions on the same issue. And they said, yeah, if you can find one, Well, it was really, really easy. Lots of these petitions are about similar issues. And obviously, being the UK, what you need to do is find one that's got to do with a cute animal. And then it's okay, it'll be easy. So we go for the badger. Actually, badgers are not very cute, but they are having a bad time at the moment, with the proposed badger cull. And there's a lot of people against that. It was very easy to find 3 petitions exactly on that issue, campaigning against the badger cull, one of which had hardly any signatures, one which had a medium amount of signatures, and one which had over 100,000 signatures qualifying for a parliamentary debate. So if you're interested in petitions and badgers, take a look at that. But we want to do some more analysis of issues and see what it tells us about what the British population care about, or the signing population. And we also want to look at other platforms. I'll be really interested to hear. I know that we're moving on now to talk about the German platform. I'm very interested to hear about that. Also be interested to, we're going to start looking at some of the NGO platforms like change.org, which was mentioned earlier, and look at some of the European initiatives, although they are not fantastically well used as yet. Just to end then, petition signing, I believe, as I said at the beginning, is an interesting example of collective action. It fits into a wider kind of democratic model that we have started to develop, which we believe encapsulates sort of current trends. Petitions are a good example of that, and also a good way of understanding it. We call it chaotic pluralism. It's like the pluralist model developed by US political scientists in the 50s and 60s, and on which the American federal state is based. It's based on the idea of lots of different interests, of a sort of pluralist pattern of diversity and competing interests, which structures both society and the state. It has things in common with that, with that model of democracy, but it's much more disorganized, it's much less group-based, it's much more individualized, with individual stories like the woman with her petition against the banks. It's much more fast-moving. In those ways, it differs from earlier pluralist models of democracy. That makes it a dynamic system. It's got unpredictable behavior. It's unstable, with these great sort of rushes of activity and then stasis a lot of the time. It's characterized by non-linear relationships with very high degrees of interconnectivity, of tipping points where tipping over into critical mass, and thresholds for participation. In that sense, it's like a chaotic system. It's a bit like the weather, for example, the classic example of the chaotic system. It makes social systems a bit more like natural systems. It may be that we can use some of the same tools we use to understand natural systems to understand social systems. In that sense, it means quite fundamental changes for the way that we do research. I know something of that, working as I do. Of my immediate research team, 1 is a physicist and 2 are computer scientists. That's a challenge for me, just in terms of communication. Sometimes I can just ask them if it's legal, rather than knowing exactly what they are doing. So I think mobilizations on social media, exemplified by petition platforms, do create uncertainty in political life. They make it more difficult to understand, but they also, to some extent, give us the tools to understand it. So they kind of take away understanding and then they give it back. They might also, as well as giving it to researchers and those of us who want to understand political life, they might also give something back to governments who want to understand their citizens. There's a huge, just in this petitions data set, there's a huge amount of information about what British and American people care about, what they're interested in, what they're willing to do something about, where they live, all sorts of interesting information which governments could maybe do something with to sort of understand their citizenry. So it would be a good future. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan, for this fascinating talk, really interesting insights. We now come to the German standing and some information and data about that. Just one remark, when people here refer to this morning or yesterday, it's because we had an academic conference here, and not all of you were part of that, so don't be confused, and that's why this reference is made. So, when we talk about the German situation, what we present right now, or basically Jan will present right now, is part of a bigger project effort we have on understanding participation. I mentioned that already. And one module we are researching on is e-petitions. And I am a lawyer by trade, so I'm dealing with these kind of things and not data generally speaking, but it's changing. For me, this thing is extremely interesting because of these two things you can see here. In the middle, you see the basis of it all in the German Constitution. So what we are talking about is something enshrined in the Constitution, or something that has been invented by someone just out of whim. It's part of our political system, and it is changing. It has started as a kind of individual letterbox, citizens complaining about something, and Parliament should do something about that. And that has dramatically changed, and we have seen that in with the example from the UK already. When you introduce something like an online platform, then it is not a letter in a letterbox. Other people can see that, other people can react to that, other people can co-sign a petition, and something new starts, something that you compared with an earthquake or weather phenomena or whatever. So that's why it is interesting, even from a lawyer's perspective. They're usually not so interested in these data. In this instance, we are extremely interested in data, and so I'm extremely interested in what my colleague Jan Schmidt will present now. Jan, please.
I think I'll use this and see if this is working. Yep. All right. So I don't have to stand behind the microphone stand. Well, moin moin from me as well. Nice to be here. I'm responsible for the data, as Wolfgang said. I'm the sociologist, so I'm going to introduce some really recent findings. Actually, it's an ongoing, we're right in the middle of analyzing the data on the German e-petition platform. In case you're not familiar with the e-petition platform of the German Bundestag, it was established in 2005, sort of as a pilot project. 3 years later, it was evaluated, and at least one person in the room I know of was involved in that evaluation. So there were reports and user surveys, and in 2008, Parliament decided to start sort of the regular operation of the e-petition platform. In fall last year, August, September 2012, there was a major relaunch, and now the platform looks like this. So if you go on the e-petition platform of the Bundestag, you'll see this screen. Part of the changes, there were changes made to the interface, there were changes made to the discussion board that is attached to each petition. And the one change that we're interested in as part of the project was the change that since fall 2012, you can decide whether your signature on a petition will be displayed with your real name or whether a pseudonym will be used. So you can choose, if I sign a petition, I can choose whether there will be Jan-Hinrich Schmidt signed this petition or whether a pseudonym will be used. I still have to register with my real name and my address, so it's not completely anonymous. But I can choose to have a number displayed instead of my real name. So I can't choose any nickname such as, I don't know, football fan 2012 or something. So there's a random number given. But if I want to, I can decide not to have my real name displayed as a signer of the petitions. And one of the questions we wanted to deal with the research was whether this change in the design of the platform itself, in the sort of technical structure of the system, led to changes in user behavior. That was one of the sort of early research questions. To answer this, we basically used two data sets. Oh no. Just one more screenshot. This is what the petition platform looks like. If you look at the list of recent petitions, so you'll have the name of the petition, running ID, and then this petition, for example, which is dealing with unemployment, the unemployment system, had at that point 317 signers. You see, even from this screenshot, you see that a lot of these petitions only get a few signers. Keep in mind, if you don't know it, I'll tell you, keep in mind that a petition has to reach a quorum of 50,000 signers in order to be sort of eligible to be discussed in the parliament. So what was the data we used? First, and we were very thankful for that, we got part of the database of the platform. So the office of the sort of the petition department provided us with a copy of the database of the platform, of course, without any personal identification information. We just got IDs and some information on the user, for example, whether they selected a male or a female greeting. It's hard to say in English, so you can select whether you want to be dressed as Herr Schmidt or as Frau Schmidt. So that was we used that as a proxy for gender. We got information on the petitions, so we know we have a petition ID, and we know petition 1000 was started on that date and ended on another date. And we got information on the individual signatures, so we know that user number 20,000 signed petition number 1000 on date X. So by combining these data sources, we can identify some patterns, and I will show you some of the first graphs we already sort of calculated. That is pretty much sort of the same data Helen was talking about. So we got data about the actual acts of signing petitions on the petition platform. In addition, we conducted an online survey. So we set up a questionnaire, an online questionnaire that was introduced on the platform itself. The survey was online in fall this year. We had, well, to be honest, we hoped for a larger response. So in the end, we ended up with about 250 people who completed the questionnaire, which makes it actually hard to deal with the answers in subgroups. For example, since most of the users just sign petitions and don't upload petitions, we only have a small number in that sample of people who actively petition something on the platform. So with the results, I won't give you any sort of data on those people who actually upload petitions on the platform, but just data on those about 90% of these 244 people who said that they have at least once or several times signed a petition on that platform. And another caveat, it's not statistically representative for the users of the platform, because the information for the survey was introduced on the starting site of the platform. Any user who just visited any given petition, for example, because a link was forwarded on Twitter, any user who just visited a petition, signed the petition and left, didn't have the chance to see the information for our survey. So we think, we can't tell for sure, but we think that we that our sample is biased towards the more active users, those people who regularly use the starting platform to enter and navigate the starting site of the platform to enter and navigate the site. So enough of the context. What were the questions? What questions and what answers can I present to you today? First questions, similar to what Helen presented. How many signatures does the typical petition get? If you rank all the 2,600 petitions in our data set according to the number of signatures they get, with the most popular petition on number 1 and the least popular as number 2060 something, then you get a very typical distribution, the so-called power law distribution, with only a few numbers of petitions, and I'll give you the exact number in a second, getting lots of signatures, and most of the petitions in the long tail with less than 1,000, even less than 500, even less than 100 signatures per petition. This distribution makes it somewhat well, difficult to give you any average numbers, because well, the average number of signatures a petition gets is 1,311. But obviously, as you can see, most of the petitions are way below, and the average is only this high because there are few petitions that get lots of signatures. We looked at the petitions that got more than 10,000 signers, 46, and more than 50,000 signers, that's the quorum, remember that? Only 11 petitions between 2008 and beginning of 2013. The most popular petition in our data set was the Zensursula petition. Those of you familiar with the German Netzpolitik movement will know this. This was in 2009, and it was sort of the big bang of the German internet political movement, a petition against plans of the then government to introduce stop signs warning users of child pornography on the internet. This petition got more than 130,000 petitions on the platform, so this will be here the number 1. Another average that is, I'll give it to you anyway, but which is kind of meaningless, is the number of signers per day, because Helen discussed the sort of the early rush to petitions. So on average, a petition gets 33 signers a day, but one of the next steps we're going to do with the data set is to see whether we can identify temporal patterns and see whether petitions that will get more signers in the beginning or at the end of petitions share common traits or share any differences. And another lesson we can learn from this sort of kind of data is there is no correlation between the age of the platform and the number of signatures. So it's not that the people will learn of the platform and then will regularly use the platform and sign petitions. So the idea that the information that the platform is out there will spread and people will just regularly visit them. We can't identify this kind of effect, so there is no general, we call it knowledge of the platform effect. The average share or the average number of signatures per petition stayed rather constant across the whole time frame we analyzed here. Now to the user survey, what are the user's reasons or motivations to sign a petition? So now we are looking at those 215 people in our sample of the survey who said that they have signed at least one petition yet. We asked them, amongst other things, what were the reasons for you to sign a petition? If you have signed more than one, then think of the last one you signed. And we gave them a 4-point Likert scale, so people were given these answer options and should, to each answer option, they should say, I agree to that completely, or I disagree completely with that particular reason. 4 would be agree completely, so the higher than the average overall respondents, the more agreement to that particular statement. And you can see that with those 4 reasons, they are all in the range of agreement. So we gave the participants reasons they all could agree to, more or less. The one reason that is the most important on average to our respondents was they signed petitions because they want the Bundestag to deal with the concern. So they have sort of impact on the political system in mind. They don't want to sign the petition because they want to express their opinions just in general, but they want the petition to succeed to enter the parliamentary discussion. you see the other reasons here. Again, the differences are not that big, but still you can see sort of an order of the reasons. Interestingly, well, it's not a reason, but the factor that e-petitions are what you called micro acts of participation. We asked the question, or we asked the respondents to rate the statement, "I signed the petition because it's so easy to do that." That's something, again, on average people agree to, but they agree to less than to the other reasons. So for the people in our survey, reasons such as I want to give my voice to a certain cause, or I want to have the parliament discuss the issue I'm signing for, are in that respect more important than the sheer ease of a given of signing a given petition. Again, something Helen mentioned, talking about Twitter and viral spread of information. We asked the question, through which channels did you learn of petitions you signed? We gave them number of options, and interestingly enough, about half of the people, the people in our survey said they learned of the last petition they signed through the platform itself. So apparently, these are users that visit the site, visit the petition platform to browse around and see whether there are any petitions that appeal to them. Twitter, the sort of the viral marketing, the information about petitions from your friends, from your social networks, is following. About a third of the people said they learned about the last petition through that channel. And then you see the other channels such as journalistic media, but also other sites, organizations, or dedicated websites, etc. Of course, people could give multiple answers, so the numbers add up to more than 100. But again, it's the sort of the relative rank of these answers that is interesting. That apparently there's something which colleagues of mine from the University of Bamberg called a spillover effect, that people visit the platform for any reason and then see that there are other interesting petitions and then decide to sign these petitions as well. Fourth and last question for this presentation, and that's the one I mentioned in the beginning. What impact did the change in the architecture of the platform have on signatures? So what impact did the introduction of the feature to sign with a pseudonym have on participation? It surely changed the behavior of those people we surveyed, because again, remember that the option was introduced only last year. But in our sample, we have about a third of the people say they will always sign petitions with their real name, but almost the same size, a group, 27% says they always sign with a pseudonym, so with the number, and they decide not to disclose their real name. So these two, well, it's sort of extremes, either always real name or always pseudonym. Then you can see other, the smaller groups who say that they probably decide depending on the topic or how they feel on that day, whatever the reason behind that might be. This is the survey data. We can also tell from the data set, so from the actual user data. This is a somewhat complicated graph. So we can calculate for each petition which went online after the switch, so after August 2012. We have the information how many people signed this petition with their real name and how many people signed this petition with a pseudonym. So we can, for each petition, we can calculate the share of people who use their real name. So for example, there is, I think it was 1 or 2 petitions where about 46 or 47% of the users used their real name. We see that there are about 10% of all the petitions where only 20% of the users used their real name. We can see that there's no petition where more than half of the signers use their real name. So the shift in the structure, in the design of the platform apparently had the result that a large majority of the petitions get a large majority of signers who use the pseudonym. This is neither good nor bad in itself. It just shows that there is a remarkably it's a visible effect this change in architecture had. just to avoid one of the questions that might come up in the discussion, the option to sign with a pseudonym is the default setting. So when you decide to sign a petition and you enter your name and your address, then there is sort of a click box where you can decide whether you want to use a pseudonym or want to use your real name. And the option, I want to use a pseudonym, is the pre-selected option. So what we also see here is kind of the effect of a default setting. It would be interesting to see, and this would be kind of a natural experiment as well, what would happen if the default setting would be changed to I want to use my real name. But what we see here is that the effect of the default setting and of the option to use a pseudonym has the effect that most of the petitions are signed by most people with a pseudonym. Okay, this is what we also can see here, or what we can calculate from the data, is whether the petitions that have been introduced after this change in the design get more or less signatures. We found a small effect on average in, excuse me, not in the number of signatures, of course, but in the share of. No, sorry, get confused by my own slides. Of course, the average number of signers a day has changed somewhat. So before the switch in 2012, we had an average of about 33 signers a day. After the switch, we have an average of about 40 signers a day. But so it's a slight difference, but it's not statistically not significant. So we can conclude that the switch in this option has not led to sort of a mobilization effect, that now all those people who were formerly deterred by giving their real name now enter the platform and sign petitions pseudonymously. To conclude, I wanted to provide you some first insights into our analysis of the e-petition platform of the German Bundestag. Very important for me, and it sort of replicates what Helen already told us for the US and the UK. We have this typical long tail effect. Only a few petitions get lots of signatures. Most of them, well, you could say fail in a way, but at least they don't get substantial numbers of signatures. We know that people who participate via the signature of petitions do this because they want to bring that particular issue up to the attention of the German Bundestag. The technical ease to sign a petition is not the main driver of this kind of participation, although it's of course an important factor. We had this, I mentioned it, this effect of the signer overspill, that people, at least the people in our survey, learn about the petitions on the platform itself. They visit the platform for any reason and see that there are petitions that seem to agree with their own opinions. And last but not least, the change in the signing options had an effect on the distribution of real names versus pseudonyms, but it had no effect on the mobilization of signatures for the petitions overall. Again, only first steps out of the machine room of the data analysis. The one path we are following now is to look into more detail into the temporal patterns, to see whether we can identify sort of successful patterns or unsuccessful patterns of signing over the days of the petition. And right now we are extracting information on the topics of the petitions. So we have the 2,600 petitions, and right now we are checking the website on what topics these petitions are, because eventually we also want to see whether there are differences in signing behavior, for example, between petitions on internet politics versus petitions on, let's say, I don't know, social security or on wine regulation, for example. So that's something, I don't know whether we will present it at the next HIC meeting or any other opportunity, but right now, thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to questions.
Thanks very much. Extremely interesting, and new projects are immediately coming into mind on wine regulation, but I have questions already here. Jan, will you join us here as well, please? And Jeanette.
Yeah, thank you. Should I go up? I have a comment and a question. The comment concerns the thresholds. From what I understand, in the UK you need 100,000 signatures to get a debate in the Parliament. Is that right? Is that what you...
Yes, you do now. Before, you needed 500 signatures. On the earlier platform, you needed 500 signatures to get an official response. And then after that, there was nothing, except there is the example of one signature about road pricing, which got 1.8 million signatures. And actually got the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, did the largest sort of email out to all the people who signed it, individual email. From what I know of government IT systems, I was a bit worried they would all have had to be done individually, but fortunately they managed to do it automatically. On the platform now, 100,000 gets a parliamentary debate. 10,000, it's a bit ambiguous. 10,000 gets you an official response, but it's not totally clear, but it probably gets you an official response.
Then I find it even more flabbergasting. What I meant was that in Germany, the threshold seems to be much lower, half that amount, 50,000 you need, and one would think that a public debate is an incentive enough to make people actually sign or sort of invent new petitions. But it seems the opposite. You have much more participants in this petition system than in Germany, even though the threshold in Germany is much lower. So that is my comment. Perhaps you want to comment on that. And my question concerns the successful petitions in the UK. From what I understood, what you said is it's a matter of whether you mobilize enough people on the first days or in the first hours that this will make it more likely that you raise a lot of signatures. But have you also looked at the substance of those successful petitions? Because you also said that many of them are about similar issues. So is there nothing on the substantive side that sort of makes it more likely that you have a successful petition?
It's actually, with a data set like this, it's actually quite difficult to analyse the issues. It's not as easy as it seems to be, because when you get a data set of this size, just about anything is significant. What I was saying was that, yes, there are lots of petitions on the same issues. There's a lot of petitions that get rejected, by the way, for one reason or another, and then they don't get on the site. But even then, there are a lot of issues that are similar, and it is possible to find petitions on the same issue that have completely different fates. So the issue is not enough. There's other stuff going on there. And I suspect the kind of secret to that will in part be what happens on social media and the extent to which it's coordinated on social media. I mean, I think that will be one of the things that distinguishes them. That's not to say that there isn't more we can do with issue, but it's not, it's not screaming out at us. Basically, there's something going on here which is overriding issue in terms of the kind of dynamics of this data.
Question relating to the previous question. How local is petition possible in the UK? Is it only nationwide issues and only things that are brought to Parliament, or are there also sort of local municipalities petition initiatives? I think yes, but I just want to check.
Yes.
And if that's true, yes, and that's yes, then do you think that's one of the reasons why the UK is so far ahead than Germany? Because in Germany we do not have this local mobilization of issues first, and then you get one step further to national. Do you think that's one of the reasons why Germany is lagging behind, next to the general usage of social media?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, again, we haven't analysed it, and it's something I'm looking forward to analysing when we get to the, looking at the kind of map and the ecology, and then we can look at local issues. At the moment, they're just sort of buried in there, these local issues being treated in a sort of national way. And I suspect what happens is, I mean, the trouble is they're local issues, but they haven't got as big a constituency of people who's going to care about it. So they probably get a bit ignored. And whatever happens with they're not going to get a parliamentary debate anyway.
Oh, sorry, then my English was not good enough. I meant that is there a petition level on a municipality level, so that in one area of a city or so, there is a petition which only relates to that area, to this jurisdiction? Or are there only petitions which are national-wide?
Well, you can put local petitions on the national site, yes. And then they, as I say, they get treated. I mean, they're there, but obviously they probably not got as many signatures because not so many people are interested in them. They won't get a parliamentary debate. So they're just sort of, and also they might not be something that the national government feels like doing anything about or even could do anything about. So in a way, they don't get treated very well. Are there local petition platforms? Yes. Well, yes, interestingly, the original site, the number 10 Downing Street site, was made by the social enterprise My Society, which I expect some of you might have heard of. And I think they were a little bit upset, actually, because when the new administration came in on the Cabinet Office site, they produced a completely new platform and kind of didn't use the old one. And I think My Society they thought, why? Why couldn't they use our one? Anyway, they sort of gave it to local governments to use. And they have, but it's too early to say. For ages, they didn't really sort of use it at all. I mean, there is something that we haven't sort of discussed here, which is that governments are a little bit ambiguous about this whole petition thing. I mean, certainly the Labour administration under Tony Blair deeply regretted the whole petitions thing. And that petition that got 1.8 million signatures and actually was successful in reversing the policy in road pricing, which has never been reinstated. So it achieved real policy change of a kind that the government didn't want. You know, they deeply regretted that. But of course, once you've done it, you can't take it away. And I think local governments might feel a bit the same way.
That leads me to my second question. I'm sorry, I have a second different question, which is, did parties hijacked the results of your analysis, or are there any attempts to do it? Because by postal code, you can see how people, you know, voted by postal code. So if I am a lefty and I see that there is a petition which certainly is voted on by more sort of middle-right people, then I could say my task force goes into that postal code area to change people's mind, to make, you know, to work more on, to use this data for political action, for political parties to change opinions in that postal code. Have there been any attempts so far?
Not yet, no,
Okay.
We haven't been hijacked. But then, of course, we haven't analysed the data. The geocoded data has only been available with the new site, and we haven't analysed that data yet. I showed you a map, and that is the basic map of the data, but it doesn't really mean anything until we start normalising the data by area. It's going to be quite a complicated, we're going to work on, we've had to recruit a geographer into our already very multidisciplinary team to be able to analyse that. So it's not been in a state for political parties to be able to hijack. I would say, however, I mean, I ended with the point that I thought governments should be interested in this data, and we are talking to them. I mean, I'm actually on the advisory board of the Government Digital Service, so I talk to them anyway, but we're going especially to talk to them about this data next week. In fact, we're going to the Cabinet Office, and we hope that they will be very interested in it to the extent whereby giving us some more data from the log usage data, but we'll see.
Thanks very much. We have one additional question, and then I guess we have to wrap it up for time reasons. Where's the mic?
Here. Here is it.
Oh. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Ich finde es ziemlich scheiße, dass der eine hier drei Fragen stellen kann und wir kommen da nicht dazu.
Just the mic, please.
Okay, I'm from Campact, which is an NGO which collects online petitions. And we have some very different findings. For us, the most important tool to spread petitions is email, above everything else. Social media comes next, but with a very distant. And by doing a survey before we started petition, we can predict will it go viral just regarding how many people are willing to share via email.
Some remarks on that?
No, it's a good point. What we can't tell from the from the database is how people actually got to know or learned about a petition they signed. The survey data, the question only related to the last petition they signed, so there might be some effect. But I mean, I agree completely with you that both social media and email are important tools for people to spread information within their social networks. And social network not in the sense of Facebook as a social network, but of their friends and their colleagues and the people they have any affiliations with it. So it's interesting to see, and maybe we can have a chat later on, because you seem to run analysis of your data as well, to see whether we can draw any comparisons. The online platform of the Bundestag, in its current form, provides a feature of telling other people about the petition, and that's sort of an email system. The platform doesn't provide, in brackets yet, I don't know, doesn't provide any option of tweet this or like this on Facebook. So it hasn't integrated into social media yet, and still people say that they, about a third of the people say they learned about the petition via social media. So it's definitely an interesting aspect of this whole spread of information about petitions.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the questions. I think we have to stop here. It's a pity because I have a lot of additional questions, but we learned a lot already. And thanks again to Jan Schmidt and Herrn Magetz. Thank you.